Welcome to the lore tours of Intergalactic Aerospace Expo 2951. This is where I walk the floor of IAE and tell you all about the history of the ships on display and their creators. Now join me on the floor for your tour. Welcome back to the floor here for Argo Consolidated Outland, Kruger and Greycat Day. I apologize if my voice is a little hoarse and I'm a little sniffly. It's like day 7, day 8 for me, so I'm a little tired, but we'll get through it. We'll talk about this, and I may, have to pause a few moments here and there, just because, hay fever season for me. Anywho, let's get started about who is Argo Astronautics. Who is Argo Astronautics? What ships do they make? Who founded it? Why did they make these ships? So on and so forth. Well, the best way of describing Argo is that it was founded by Alana Redmond as Argo Technologies. Now, Alana's mother worked on the North American high-speed rail, or I forget the name of it. It was essentially a rail system, a Gravlev or Maglev train system that ran from Alaska all the way to Patagonia, from Anchorage to from the tip of Alaska all the way down to the tip of Chile. And it had run freight and passengers across North and South America for 100+ years. And when Alana Redmond was basically raised on the tracks, she took up a position similar to her mother in Argo. On the rail systems, and discovered that one of the major problems that the rail systems were having was that they were falling apart. They were a century old, and they were just not competitive against the brand new technologies created by Roberts Space Industries that would allow for suborbital hops, as well as long-range travel because of quantum drives. So there needed to be something to improve the performance and the efficiency of these trains. And she realized by accident, the train she was on was waiting to be repaired. There was a piece of track ahead of it that needed to be repaired. So repair crews were out repairing the track, when she looked down and saw a piece of scrap metal that had fallen off a train at some point and been crushed against the track lines. And she realized that the magnetic forces that are involved in the maglev train had caused this piece of scrap to fully weld into the track line itself. And she looked at it and she goes, this looks exactly like a repair job, like what a repair job would do. So she did some testing and realized that the trains themselves could repair the tracks given the right circumstances. You didn't need expensive crews. You could easily just essentially take a piece of metal, plop it onto the track, have the train run over it, and it would seal the tracks, the cracks. This worked so well that she founded her own company named Argo, which was an abbreviation of her first name, or her name, Alana Redmond, and Go at the end, just, because Go. And so this is in 2243. Pretty old for human standards. So that worked fairly well, and it caused the track system to really improve. She then took her technologies to other rail systems, maglev systems all over Earth and Mars, and was able to build and maintain the first ever maglev trains on Mars during the early colonization period, causing a huge kind of boom in their business. But as they were expanding the rail systems across the eventual UNE across Seoul, they realized that there was a breakdown in terms of efficiency. You see, the trains were now running faster and more efficient than they'd ever done before, but there was a slowdown in unloading cargo from them. So they realized what they needed was a vehicle that could quickly unload the cargo and bring that cargo to an orbital station. That vehicle became known as the Orbital Utility Vehicle. It's Argo's first ever ship. It was designed essentially as a quick and easy fix to a problem. They weren't built very complex. They didn't have quantum drives. They were just designed to get from ground to orbit and drop off cargo and return, and be cheap enough that you could buy 100 of them and just kind of quickly do your unloading and loading. So as this went on, people began to fall in love with the OUC, the Orbital Utility Craft. And many of them were stretched beyond their normal lifespans because people were really desperate to keep them because they really liked how efficient they were, how easy they were to repair. So eventually, Argo realized that how successful the OUC was. They decided to start making ships like the OUC to fill in some of the roles. The first being the Argo multi-purpose utility craft, or multi-purpose utility vehicle, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But it's important to note that Argo pretty much makes all of the rail systems in the UEE today. Highly likely that all of the transport systems that you see, especially Lorville, possibly even Microtech, were designed by Argo. So if you see little trams on stations, or even inside, I think the Bengal has a tram system. Likely those were designed by Argo, because Argo is like the train manufacturer of the UEE. All right, let's go talk about the Argo MPUV. Excuse me for a moment for praising this ship. Glory to thee, King of Kings. The great winner and victor of the Best in Show competition. It is the Argo MPUV, the Argo Cargo. Now, it's important to note that the MPUV was first designed sometime after the OUC was. So, look at the exact date for the OUC. I don't think there was any date for the OUC. 2665. So 2665 is when the Argo MPUV was first introduced. And it was designed as a better replacement for the OUC, whereas the OUC was a very quick and dirty ship, a shuttle essentially that was converted to do hauling. This was designed from the beginning to be a utility vehicle that could do hauling and have other things. Now, as we see inside here, the actual cargo bay is pretty small and has one seat for one passenger, and this is kind of for like personal effects if you need to. The cab itself only has one seat. Not really a lot of cargo space inside for the pilot's gear. This is really, really simple. It's designed effectively as just a cockpit with some engines and a modular back. That's the big thing. It's like this cargo variant could be swapped out. This is not just like a bespoke thing. There's a someone mentioned I do say bespoke a lot. Yeah, hey, blame CIG. But it's hard to see up here. But if you look at the very top, right there, yeah, right there, that the little connection is actually a docking port. So this full section can be dropped. In fact, the MPUV was so popular that it actually is the standard utility craft that comes aboard pretty much every single UEE capital ship today. You can see a little bit better up there. You can see the little cradle right up there. This is the MPVUP, which is the personnel carrier. Now, this isn't just, a little personnel carrier. This is an escape pod. This is the standard escape pod which is why you see the little legs down there, for ships Javelin and up. So if you go walk through the 890, at the very exits of the 890, you have these pods waiting for you. You have to go through. to be able to get inside. These are escape pods. So it's designed to carry standard escape pods, so to be search and rescue if it needs to be. There are also talks of a military variant of this, which is probably the one that works with the Idris and the Javelin. There's even the talk of the rescue variant, the MPVU-1. I want to say R? P. No, not P. P is personnel carrier. Yeah, there's another rescue variant, which is supposedly out there, which essentially is, again, these are all the same ship with just different modules in the back. And in the future, you'll be able to drop this module and pick up any other Argo module that exists, which is what it's designed to be anyways. This is a Swiss Army knife, and that's why it was so loved in the UAE. You'll find these everywhere. You'll find them on capital ships. You'll find them at stations. You'll find them on docking, like at landing ports. They're everywhere because they are so good at pretty much anything you need to. You need to get a bunch of people to orbit pretty quickly. You just slap that personnel carrier on it and take them up. You need to take some cargo down, bring that down. If there's an accident in orbit, you need to pick somebody up, use the rescue variant. The options are pretty much endless. And because they're so simple, these are often the Piper Cubs, the training ships for most new pilots outside of the military. So if you're a brand new civilian pilot, the likelihood of you using an MPUV in your training is very, very high because they're small, they're cheap, they're simple, and they're easy to fly. So, all right. Well, since the MPUV began a brand new kind of era for Argo. They started calling themselves, instead of Argo Technologies, they called themselves Argo Transportation. Because, again, this ship right here is known colloquially as the Argo Cargo, because it was, for a long time, the only ship. But after Argo Technologies became Argo Transportation, they started developing more vehicles, more tech, and eventually from 2665, it was Argo Technologies, and then they went from that to Argo Transportation. And then once they built their first ship, they became Argo Astronautics. So this is the new era of Argo. These ships right here. Now the Mole, we don't know when the Mole was built, nor do we know when the Raft was built. There's no kind of lore behind them. But the Mole is a multi-operator laser extractor, is what Mole stands for. It's designed to allow for multiple pilots or multiple crew to operate a larger vessel. A kind of competitor to a lot of other ships of its type in the verse. There's really, unfortunately, not a lot. The term, the only thing I can find on this one, it says the Mole lives by the adage, many hands make for light work. So I think that this was designed to speed up mining, similar to the MPUV speeding up cargo transfers, trains, that the repair technologies speeding up trains. Everything about Argo is about improving infrastructure. So I have a theory that this was built to improve mining, to speed up the mining process as much as possible. Now, this is the only ship in the Argo fleet that is really doesn't have a lot to do with infrastructure, but it does make sense of that, speed it up. We need to get things more efficient, more easy, that sort of kind of mentality that Argo seems to have. Then we have the Raft. Again, this brand new ship just came out. I'm going to look at the interior real quickly just because it's a really well-designed interior. Let me find the... Gotta be the entrance somewhere. I think this is it right here. Yeah. To show off the brand new ship anyways, because I know a lot of people will ask for it. So this is the same type of elevator that you would see on a on the Mole over there. Work top deck and work our way down. Very slow. This is the engineering compartment. Back here, you'd see more compartments. This area is the guess it's just more compartments here. This is the cab for operating. So the thing that the raft has over other ships is that it is self-loading and unloading. That up there being the the tractor beam technology there. But yeah, so this is designed as essentially a mobile crane. It functions similar to how a crane would work in on a dock, but it doesn't need to have a crane because it has its own crane, which is this section right here. So it can function in areas which do not have a lot of infrastructure, which is, again, Argo's thing these days. They like to build ships that are designed to be self-sufficient as much as possible. This is the cargo bay, or the kind of personal cargo bay. You've got weapon storage, suit lockers, and the bathroom. This is where the crew will sit. It's actually got a lot of personal cargo space. It's got a nice comfy chairs. It's got some food distributions, so you got that kind of thing. And you've got 2 beds which turn into escape pods. Then we go down here. We got the airlock over here to the left. We've got a lift right there, and this is the transport, the actual kind of pilot area. So it's, as you can see, at least now, Argo seems to be really investing in comfort for its pilots, but also in infrastructure replacement technology. So, again, the likelihood of you seeing ships like the Mole or the ships like the Wrath and MPVU are very high in the areas around docks or frontier, especially where there is no station to help unload cargo, or no cargo lifts, nothing that's designed to like really pull cargo off of ships. The raft will be that sort of thing. Now, with that talking about that, let's move on to talking about Consolidated Outland. Welcome to the Consolidated Outland wing. Let's talk a little bit about who Consolidated Outland is. Their headquarters in Stalford on Retief in the Bremen system, which is unusual because Bremen is known as really more of an agricultural system. They do a lot of farming, though that is sort of starting to change. For instance, Bremen was the home of what was called Bremen Mills, which eventually became Terra Mills, which is the food company that makes Big Benny's noodles and makes a lot of the food that we see in the verse. So Retief is a place where a lot of the resources for those foods are gathered. Ingredients for those foods are gathered and then, sold. But because of the volatile nature of agriculture, and with more and more places becoming more self-sufficient with their own agribusiness, places like Vega, for instance, becoming super self-sufficient rather than being relying on other systems, because Bremen is literally right next to Vega, so like that would have been one of their major supplier, like one of the major customers. There's been a push to move away from agriculture, and probably the most ardent believer and defender of this push is the quote-unquote rebel trillionaire, Silas Kerner. He's the heir of the Kerner family fortune. The Kerner family owns pretty much most of Bremen. They are one of the founding families of Bremen, and they have a lot of power. But he has done everything from, I think he owns, gotta look through some of the stuff. Ooh. He owned a bunch of different companies, though his biggest one is the one he founded because of his love of ships. Let me go through some of the things he has. All right. He has an RSI Zeus. Oh no, so he owns he's a shipping magnate. He owns Tricross lines. He also controls Um, it controls interest in no fewer than 9 text, cast, and holo outlets. So he owns a lot of news companies. And he's addicted to fame, tabloid stockum, even the slight of anything Puritan. He's super clean because he's a nerd. Uh, he crossed his multi-billion mark as a multi-billionaire by the time he was 22. And the real reality was that he was actually a huge space pilot fan. He loved astro navigation. He loved astronautics in general. He loved flight. He loved space. And he actually began to own a large collection of rare ships, which includes a vintage RSI Zeus, the first ship to ever have a quantum drive, the first ever commercial ship available with a quantum drive, something that an average person could buy, not a company. And the sole surviving Drake lobster prototype. It's still, apparently, which still remains unflown, and it's packaged in its original shipping foam. No idea what the Drake lobster is. But his love of space and space flight caused him to try to change Bremen's fortune, and he opened Consolidated Outland. Now, Consolidated Outland was originally just made conversion kits. So, for instance, the famous F7A conversion kit that turns your F7C into an F7A, it's many, it's basically like how to put this? It's a cosmetic mostly. Was created by Consolidated Outland. But after kind of getting their foot in the door with that, they created their first ever ship known as the Mustang. Now, let me see some of his vocal. Okay. While Kerner refuses to comment on his personal life, he has been outspoken in his criticism of other manufacturers' spacecraft, seemingly finding vocal fault with a design from the Aurora. He calls it the flying trash can. The Gladiator, a half-assed toy for full-grown children to play fighter hero. Freelancer, unprintable. I don't know what that means. He's also an avid racing fan, and he owns his own racing team called the Blue Devils. And maintains a luxury box seats at the Murray Cup events. So that's just him. So he hates the Aurora. He thinks that it's a terrible introduction vehicle for your average citizen, your average civilian, your average human getting into space flight. He thinks it's just like it's garbage. It's literally garbage. So he created the Mustang. Sleek, efficient, fun to fly, and directly compatible with the Auroras. So this is, I believe, the Omega. Let's see the little sign here. The Gamma. The Gamma, which is a racing ship, and then this is over here, the Beta. So the Mustang's design is to be simple, easy to fly, and each of the variants kind of helps it give it a little bit more of a utility. So if you want to be an explorer, you get the Beta. If you wanted to race, you get the Gamma. If you wanted to fight, if you're a fighter pilot, then you would get the Delta over here. The Delta, I think, yeah. But if you just needed something to replace your Aurora with, you have the Alpha. So the thing about these ships is, while they're not incredibly popular amongst fans, they are very well known in the verse because they are affordable. They're almost the same price as an Aurora. And it's important to note that in this universe, spaceflight is very expensive. Most people do not have access to a ship. The people who have access to the ships are either people who work on the frontier and they absolutely need those to be able to survive, or people who use it for work. That's the average use of a spaceship. Taking your Aurora from a planet to space so that you could man a space station that you're in charge of. To open up your shop on a space station. But if there was a shuttle program, like if there was some sort of shuttles that would go up to the station, you'd probably do that rather than owning your own ship. So your average citizen does not actually own a ship. So any ship that becomes as affordable as an Aurora means that it's going to be fairly popular amongst your average space-going individual. So the fact that this is a direct competitor to the Aurora makes them fairly well loved in the verse. And they followed this up with the Pioneer, which we'll talk a little bit later, and then recently the Nomad. You can see a lot of these ships are designed specifically to compete with current ships. Like the Nomad is 100% a competitor to the Cutlass and to the Freelancer, or at least in Kerner's mind it is. With its own unique style and design, it has hover skids rather than regular landing gear, which in theory allows it to land pretty much anywhere, possibly even on like ice or possibly liquid as well. It doesn't require like a fixed landing gear to land. It makes it a little bit more flexible. And the big thing about it is it doesn't have a compressed cargo bay. It has an open backed cargo bay, essentially a pickup truck. This means that it's easy to access your cargo and unload your cargo, which is a big deal. As you know, Argo has proven with their raft that easy access and transfer of cargo is a very big selling point. Now, Consolidated Outland continues to kind of shake up the aerospace industry, and because Kerner has more money than sense, he will throw money at anything and everything that he thinks is cool. So, while it's important to note that Consolidated Outland is turning a profit, is doing fairly well, and is helping to reshape Bremen into a spaceship manufacturing planet rather than just being an agriculture planet. It's also very, very much Silas Kerner's like pet project. It's something that he wants to do for his own self. So, yeah. Let's move on to talk about Kruger and Greycat. All right, let's talk a little bit about Greycat Industrial. So, Greycat Industrial was founded in 2337 by Otis Boussard. The name itself comes from a nickname that he earned because he, I feel you, buddy, this one. When he was in his early 20s, his hair had turned stark white. So he became known as Greycat because his name is Otis, because CIG thinks they're funny. So Otis Boussard, Otis the cat, gray hair, Greycat. And the company did well. It made mining safety equipment mostly. And it was modest success, but nothing more. It wasn't a very profitable venture until Otis's daughter, Pippa, took over for him. Now, Pippa had gone to university with a man by the name of Reuben Pardo. Reuben was a brilliant man and a son of a bitch. He was very grating and caustic, but he was very smart, and he was a good problem solver. So when he left college, he got snapped up by a company by the name of Tatiana Terraforming to essentially be a fixer. His job was to go into problematic terraforming areas and terraforming jobs and fix the problems. That changed, though, in 2381, May 23rd. An accident caused a mine collapse that killed 37 people and injured dozens of others, including Pardo himself, who lost an arm. Now, Tatiana offered to replace his arm with the highest available prosthetics, but he refused, taking a lower grade prosthetic, because for the rest of his life, Pardo blamed himself for the accident. And this kind of changed who he was. He felt responsible for their deaths, for the deaths of those people, and felt like he needed to do penance to improve life, to improve safety overall, and to try to make sure that these kind of accidents couldn't happen again. Again, he's kind of arrogant, so he thinks he can do it single-handedly. But he was super depressed. He left Tatiana after this, and he was not doing too well. But his old friend Pippa needed some help. And so she kind of offered almost a pity job for him to help him continue to, while he was getting himself rearranged. She hired her old friend onto her small little company to help out. When she did, he revealed that he had been secretly working on a prototype of a new tool this became the Pyro multi-tool. And Pippa immediately saw the profitability in this tool. So she greenlit him, gave him some money and a team to build a prototype, which then sold very well. The actual, production line sold very well and really took Greycat from being this okay Martian mining company to being this top of the line industrial manufacturer. Then he also designed afterwards. He designed the Ariel, so the industrial armor that you see, with like kind of like halo face, that kind of stuff. That Greycat armor was designed by Pardo as well, which did very well as on top of all of this. So Pippa asked Pardo as a result to head the engineering department, but he declined. He refused any promotions for the remainder of his career and avoiding all managerial positions so he could focus on building. He was a man on a mission. He wanted to stop people from dying from mining accidents, like the accident that took his arm. He did a lot of times to work on things and build things, but he wasn't entirely. A lot of his ideas were kind of out there, and they weren't fully embraced by the board or by Pippa. He eventually died in 2458. But as the company continued to go forward, Lena Boussard in the early 27th century, in the 2600s, was seeing her company on the decline. The copycat industry was very high. Both the Ariel and the Greycat were being essentially ripped off and sold, like generic versions were being created all over the empire. So the profits were falling. And so what she did was to try to increase production, to try to drop the price of the multi-tool and to try to increase the availability of the multi-tool to as many customers as possible. So she overhauled the entire system, their entire logistics system, and built factories that would build pyros everywhere in the UAE, which worked okay until it completely failed, because, as I'll read it, it turned out to be costly miscalculation. Many of the original plants either had chose to ignore or failed to meet strict standards set by Greycat. To make matters worse, some of these were unreliable third parties who leaked and outright sold many of the designs and specs to counterfeiters. Soon, most knockoffs carried the exact same color scheme and design specifications as the real thing. Many of them had been claimed to be made by Greycat Industries, Greycat, not Greycat Industrial, which is the company name itself, a distinction lost in many casual consumers. So she led to, she essentially nearly destroyed the company. So her brother, Marcel, came in afterwards, stepped up and took the reins of the company. Now, he needed to fix the problems his sister had created. So he did two things. One, he lobbied the UAE with the money they had to enact stricter copyright laws, to cut down on bootlegs. And this is Mezzer era UAE, so if you had enough power to talk to the Mezzers and get them to do these sorts of things, I'm not saying Mezzers are going to execute counterfeiters, but I am going to say counterfeiters may end up disappearing and never coming back. They took this kind of stuff seriously. So that worked fairly well. But the second thing they did was they, documents would later reveal that Marshall also contracted private security forces to find counterfeiters and convince them by, quote, any means necessary to shutter their operations. Took matters into his own hands. Lastly, the big thing he did was he had access to the plans of Pardo. The old schematics that were at this point maybe 100 plus years old that he had made that were never brought to life. So he took one look at them and said, let's make these. These included the PTV. Now, the PTV was marketed as a So this was designed to navigate cramped mine shafts. That's what this is designed for. This is a mining buggy. It was designed for, two people to hop in and then go through an inspection of a mining tunnel. So they're designed to be small, efficient, have lightweight, and easy to drive. The other designs obviously were these two, the Rock and the Rock DS, which were designed as mining utility vehicles designed to make mining more efficient and a little bit safer, because this roll cage would prevent for a lot of problems. You have a lot more maneuverability with mines, and you have the ability to safely mine a material far away. So if there's some problems with structural integrity of the mine, they can get out pretty quickly. With the DS allowing for a little bit more accessibility in those caves as well. So these vehicles, all designed by by Pardo, were very effective, because the PTV turned out not to be as popular as a mine vehicle as it was just a popular vehicle. People loved it. People liked to drive these around on city streets. They were really good for industrial places and hangars where you needed to get point A to point B very quickly. The Rock and the Rock DS became pretty popular later on as well for their own kind of easy to use systems, pretty simple. They were small enough to navigate a lot of mines and to get to places that would require heavier lasers for mining without having to hand carry in big heavy lasers to mine out some of these materials or drills. So that's the Greycat. And the other, of course, the other major thing they made was the Cygnus mining drone, Spider drone. That's used by the Orion. So this has essentially created the household name of Greycat. The PTV specifically is probably the most famous one, but these other vehicles they really turned Greycat from being just a very good mining manufacturer to being a household name as a vehicle manufacturer. So that's Greycat. Yeah, remote ore collector. All thanks to a arrogant man with a penitence. Now we're going to look at Kruger. Now, Kruger was founded by a name named Ozel Kruger. Now, Ozel Kruger was a resident of Borea in the Magnus system. And in 2558, he opened a workshop there and called his first company Kruger Intergalactic. Ozel Kruger, her company. To deliver the first-rate products at the time and budget was quickly impressed customers. So she built up Kruger Intergalactic as a parts manufacturer. First, working as a workshop to help build and maintain vehicles, but eventually started to make parts. And they got large numbers of... they managed to expand very quickly, buying larger factories and expanding their business. They started off with a relationship with the company Bearing. where they were making firing pins for the P8AR. This would be the equivalent of making firing pins for the M4 series of rifles in the United States military. If you're the sole manufacturer of that, you're going to be making a lot of money. And as the Kruger began to expand, they gained working relationships with both RSI, Robert Space Industries, and with Aegis Dynamics. So soon, Kruger parts were in everything. They were in bearing products, they were in RSI ships, and they were in Aegis ships as well. However, a good and bad thing happened. In 2751, the UEE moved its headquarters because the Magnus used to be, the Berea used to be the headquarters of the UEE Navy. They moved their headquarters to Killian in 2751. This caused essentially the manufacturing, the side of the business that was dedicated to the military, not just to Kruger, but all of the industries on Berea to just collapse. Now, this meant many companies left, many companies folded. Companies like RSI and Aegis moved their operations to Killian to follow the Navy, which meant there was large properties that were going for cheap. And so Kruger said, heck yeah, brother. And they just bought up all of these empty, cheap properties and kept producing goods, essentially becoming the backbone of industry in Magnus. This is many years before Drake would come around. But the problem continued to rise as Magnus slumped into what was known as, trying to find the quote here. Magnus earned a reputation as a developed system with a frontier mentality because many people were forced to do illegal business to survive. They lost their jobs with RSI. There's no one to replace it. Kruger can only do so much. So many of them had to turn to crime to make ends meet. So as a result, Magnus became worse and worse for business because you couldn't really, anytime you try to ship business off world, you'd get attacked. So while this was bad, Artyom Chensari, Kruger's CEO at the time, claimed that they would stay loyal, they would stay in Magnus forever, and they would proudly have their parts say made in Magnus. But by 2785, it was bad. It had gone from bad to worse. In 2785, pirates raided a large convoy that was made for Kruger parts that would be destined for RSI. And RSI basically said, you need to get off of Magnus. If you have any delays like this again, we're ending our contract with you. This is unacceptable. So Kruger had to leave. But in 2789, they moved from Magnus to Castra. They actually have their headquarters in Castra 2, I think, Sherman, on Cascom, near Sherman. This is the city of Sherman. So, which is one of the systems which is most likely going to end up in game sooner rather than later after Pyro and Nyx show up, because it has a jump point to both Pyro and Nyx. So we may be able to see the headquarters of Kruger Intergalactic soon. From then, they made fairly well until the end of the Meso era. So by the end of the Meso era, someone had pointed out that Kruger made all the parts of a gun except for the gun itself. So they got together and developed their first ever weapon as a means to try to diversify their ability, their holdings, and created what's known as the Tiger Shrike series of weapons. While it wasn't well known at the time, they managed to leverage some of their contacts in Aegis. And to put it on to be like the standard gun for the upcoming Avenger. And it was raved about. Both military and advocacy personnel just loved the gun's ability and how efficient it was. And people began to encourage them to develop more weapons. Then they went from full scale weapons manufacturer. They also set their sights on making ships. So after after weapons started to, very slowly, there's only like 3 weapons that they make right now. They did eventually approach RSI saying they wanted to make a ship. And Robert Space Industries at the time was busy coming up with its latest generation of Constellation. And they thought that a snub fighter would be a fantastic addition to the Connie lineup. So working with their longtime partner, Kruger, they helped Kruger develop the P-52 and P-72, the Merlin and the Archimedes. These ships are designed to pair well with the Connie, and in fact, if you see here, see a little Gatling there, that is a Tiger Shrike, a version of the Tiger Shrike that they put on their own ship, a ballistic Gatling cannon. So these, while not perfect, are very well loved by many people, including being racing vessels, and have kind of shown that Kruger is ready to make the jump from being just a parts manufacturer. They've already made the jump to weapons manufacturer and to light, snubcraft. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Kruger in the near future starting to branch out into larger and larger ships to try to test the waters of what they can and can't do. With that being said, let's move over to the last little bit where we're going to talk about the hollow images of upcoming ships from Argo and Consolidated Outland. So this is the Argo SRV. So in the same kind of tradition as the Raft and the MPUV, this is a utility vessel, SRV standing for... I don't really know what it was. Search and rescue operations? No. I have to look it up. But the SRV, a standard recovery vehicle, is designed for search and rescue. So this is designed as a tow truck. That is a very big tractor beam right there, which can carry up to at least a Cutlass-sized vessel that is completely disabled through quantum drive. So the SRV is, while being just a tow truck, can also be utilized to haul cargo if it needs to. This is a vessel which is designed, again, like almost all Argo vessels, to replace infrastructure. If you don't have the ability to repair a vessel, you may have the ability to bring that vessel to you to repair it. If you don't have the ability to, carry large cargo containers into orbit to load, say, a hull series, you may have a vessel that's not necessarily designed to do that, but can do that with the SRV. So the space tow truck coming to you soon. And now we have the Pioneer. So a big problem that Silas Kerner had with the space industry is he saw that humanity was stunted, that we fell short in our ability to expand our influence. We had the technology to go fast and far. We had the technology to explore jump points. We had the technology to terraform worlds. But it was very difficult to either get a world terraformed or to build cities, towns, outposts on these worlds, to settle these new planets. And so he set out to fix that with his Pioneer. So the Pioneer is essentially like a mobile factory, which is designed to sit down on a world, and it has, specifically designed parts that it can make, and then you can use those parts to assemble a homestead on your own. So it is designed as a giant mobile fabrication facility, something that you need on the frontier, because otherwise you'd have to either import all the stuff or, refine, craft it yourself on your own. So this kind of helps shortcut that problem, especially for smaller companies. So if you weren't instead of hiring a construction company, you could have your own Pioneer to do that for you on remote worlds. So, and that's the Pioneer. That's Argo, Consolidated Outland, Kruger Intergalactic, and Greycat Industries here on the floor of IAE 2951. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure that you hit that like button. Comment down below. What do you think? Do you like any of these ships specifically? What do you think about the new Raft? Good, bad? You excited about the Pioneer, the SRV? Maybe the idea of more Kruger? Again, let me know down below. Remember that we do stuff like this all the time, but much more prepared videos. On Thursdays, we do a little talk about lore and Star Citizen in general with our office hours. You can join us there. We have merch. Merch is down below as well if you want to do that. And every once in a while, I do a podcast talking about lore with Jail and Algrid, talking about called Lore Citizen, talking about everything from lore. We actually talked a little bit about Argo in our first episode. Let me see what else. Patreon, if you want to support this as well, patreon.com/Galactic Historian. And like I say every time, remember, ex Historia ad Astra.